Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment. What happens when a television host who's built her career on sharp comebacks and cutting remarks encounters a Southern senator who speaks slowly, deliberately, and with the kind of calm confidence that comes from knowing exactly who he is and what he stands for? When someone who mistakes volume for validity meets someone who understands that the quietest voice in the room often carries the most power. When a host who's accustomed to controlling every conversation through interruption and aggression faces a guest who refuses to be rushed, refuses to be rattled, and refuses to play by rules designed to make him look foolish. What you're about to witness is not just another political interview gone tense. Not just another moment of talk show confrontation, not just another instance where a host and guest disagreed on live television. This is the moment Senator John Kennedy, a man whose Southern draw disguises one of the sharpest minds in Washington, whose folksy manner hides devastating wit, whose slow speech patterns make people underestimate him right up until the moment he dismantles their entire argument, reminded everyone that real power doesn't need volume, that genuine confidence doesn't require aggression, and that sometimes the most devastating response to mockery is simply refusing to be mocked. The View had invited Senator Kennedy expecting what they usually got from political guests, either defensive, squirming under aggressive questioning, or angry outbursts that would give them viral clips. Joy Behar had clearly prepared for this interview with a specific strategy: mock his intelligence, dismiss his folksy manner as an act, and frame his carefully chosen words as evidence of someone trying to hide lack of substance behind Southern charm. What Joy called asking tough questions, Kennedy would soon demonstrate was simply performing superiority without earning it. Attacking someone's communication style, because you can't effectively challenge their substance. Mocking someone's deliberate speech is evidence. They're slow-witted rather than recognizing it as the mark of someone who chooses words carefully because words matter. What Joy fundamentally failed to understand, what people who mistake quick comebacks for intelligence could never grasp, was that Senator Kennedy's slow, measured way of speaking wasn't a limitation to overcome, but a strategic choice. Every pause was intentional. Every word was selected. Every phrase was designed to land with maximum impact precisely because it emerged from careful consideration rather than reflexive reaction. This isn't about whether politicians should face tough questions, whether public figures should justify their positions, whether senators should expect scrutiny when they appear on television. This is about the difference between legitimate challenge and performative mockery, between questioning someone's positions and simply trying to make them look foolish, between journalism that seeks understanding and entertainment that seeks only to diminish. Joy Behar thought she was being clever, setting up a politician she'd decided to treat as a punchline, preparing zingers designed to get laughs at his expense, approaching the interview as an opportunity to demonstrate her superiority over someone she'd prejudged as an easy target. What she was actually doing was demonstrating that some people confuse speaking quickly with thinking clearly. That mockery isn't the same as insight, and that sometimes the person you're treating as a joke is actually several moves ahead of you. And when Senator Kennedy, who'd faced down prosecutors, debated Supreme Court justices, and navigated Washington politics for years, decided to show Joy Behar exactly what happens when you mistake a carefully crafted persona for actual limitation. What unfolded wasn't just a political interview. It was a masterclass in how real intelligence operates, how genuine confidence presents itself, and how sometimes the most devastating way to handle mockery is to stay calm while methodically dismantling the mocker. Buckle up, because what you're about to witness isn't just a clash. It's a reminder that the person speaking slowly might just be giving you time to catch up, and underestimating them is usually the last mistake you make before they show you exactly how wrong you were. The View studio buzzed with familiar energy as Senator John Kennedy was announced, the audience applauding politely but without particular enthusiasm. He wasn't a celebrity. wasn't someone most casual viewers would recognize immediately. Just another politician coming to discuss whatever political topic was trending. Joy Behar smiled as she introduced him, but it wasn't a welcoming smile. It was the smile of someone who'd already decided how this interview would go, who'd prepared her jokes and her jabs, who was approaching this less as a conversation and more as an opportunity for entertainment at her guest's expense. Our next guest, she began with that particular tone that signaled something was coming, is a man who mistakes headlines for heroism. The audience laughed on cue, but there was an edge in the air. The kind of tension that comes when people sense something might go sideways. Please welcome Senator John Kennedy, Joy said. And Kennedy walked onto the set slowly, not sluggish, but deliberate. Every movement measured and intentional in that way that made some people think he was slow when he was actually just careful. He nodded once to the crowd, once to the panel, then took his seat beside Joy without rushing, without the nervous energy that most politicians brought to television appearances. He didn't smile broadly or try to win the room immediately. The quiet confidence in his eyes did more talking than any performance could have accomplished. Joy crossed one leg over the other, papers in hand, leaning forward just enough to look casual, but maintaining that edge aggression barely disguised as curiosity. So, Senator, she started, her tone syrupy, sweet, but with sharp edges underneath. Do you believe your humor hides the lack of depth? The question landed like a slap, not inquiring about his positions or his work, but immediately attacking his intelligence, suggesting that his folksy manner was compensation for shallow thinking. The crowd murmured, half in amusement at Joy's boldness, half in tension at the aggression. Kennedy didn't blink, didn't shift in his seat, didn't show any sign that the insult had landed. When he spoke, his southern drawl wrapped around every word like velvet over steel. If depth means drowning in nonsense, he said calmly, I'll stay shallow, thank you. The laughter that followed wasn't polite or controlled. It was real, spontaneous. The sound of an audience recognizing that they just witnessed a perfect counterpunch delivered with such calm that it was even more devastating. Joy's smile faltered for just a split second before she forced it back into place. Clearly not expecting such an immediate and effective response, she'd thrown her opening punch, expecting to rattle him, and instead he'd turned it into a commentary on the absurdity of the question itself. She tried to recover, glancing at her notes, but Kennedy's calm silence filled the room more powerfully than any words. There was something unnerving about his complete composure, his absolute refusal to be rushed or rattled. Joy chuckled tightly, eyes narrowing slightly as she recalibrated her approach. You've got quite the answer for everything, don't you? She said, adding with false sweetness. I guess that works better when no one's fact-checking. The implication was clear, suggesting his clever responses wouldn't survive scrutiny, that his wit was compensation for weakness and substance. It was the kind of jab designed to make someone defensive, to provoke them into either backing down or getting angry. Kennedy leaned back slightly, the picture of ease, completely unbothered by the attempted provocation. Oh, I'm sure they will, he replied with that same measured calm. The trick is saying something true enough to survive the check. The audience reacted immediately. Some clapped. Some just watched with growing fascination, sensing that something unusual was happening. This wasn't going the way these political interviews usually went. Kennedy wasn't getting defensive or aggressive. He was simply meeting every attack with calm certainty. Joy looked toward the camera, smiling wider now, clearly trying to mask the frustration building behind her eyes. Well, she said with forced brightness, this is going to be fun. Kennedy's reply was low but cutting, delivered with that same unflappable composure. That depends, ma'am. Are we talking fun for the truth or for the ratings? The laughter that erupted this time wasn't hers to control. It came from the audience recognizing that Kennedy had just called out exactly what was happening had named the game Joy was trying to play and refused to participate in it on her terms. The first real spark of battle had been lit, and everyone in the studio could feel that this interview wasn't going to follow the script Joy had prepared. Joy leaned forward, her patience visibly thinning now. The polite smile she'd worn at the start fading into something sharper, more openly hostile. "You mock colleagues, you turn pain into punchlines," she said accusingly, her tone clipped, every word measured like a jab. Is that leadership or just laziness dressed up as charm? The studio fell noticeably quieter. The kind of silence where small sounds become magnified, someone's jewelry jingling, papers rustling, the ambient hum of studio equipment. Joy had escalated from mockery to direct accusation, suggesting Kennedy's entire approach to politics was fundamentally unserious. Kennedy looked at her without irritation, without defensiveness, just that same steady calm, like someone who'd already seen this exact attack coming from miles away and had prepared not with anger, but with truth. He took a slow breath, leaned toward the microphone with deliberate movement, and said evenly, "If truth hurts, maybe it's not my joke that's cruel. Maybe it's your comfort that's fragile." The words landed like a slap wrapped in silk, simultaneously gentle in delivery and devastating in impact. The audience reacted before Joy could formulate a response, half gasping at the boldness, half clapping at the precision of the counterattack. Even one of the co-hosts shifted awkwardly in their seat, clearly trying not to smile at how effectively Kennedy had just turned Joy's accusation into a commentary on her own defensiveness. Joy blinked hard, her jaw tightening visibly as she processed being outmaneuvered again. "Oh, that's cute," she said quickly, forcing a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "You practiced that one in the mirror." The question was meant to diminish him, to suggest his responses were rehearsed performance rather than genuine thought. But Kennedy had an answer that would shift the entire dynamic of the interview. He tilted his head slightly, a small smile ghosting his lips, not smug, just knowing. "No, ma'am," he said with that same measured calm. "You invited me for a circus. Sorry if I brought a mirror instead." The crowd exploded. Some laughed, some cheered. A few booed from Joy's supporters, but every single eye in the room was now glued to the stage, recognizing they were witnessing something unusual. A political guest, not just surviving Joy's attacks, but systematically dismantling them with calm precision. Joy froze for just a moment. The kind of pause you can't rehearse, can't hide. The visible shock of someone who's lost control of a situation they'd planned to dominate. The camera caught it all. The flash of genuine frustration, the tightening around her mouth, the flicker in her eyes when she realized Kennedy had taken the room from her. 3 seconds of silence stretched like 3 minutes, the tension palpable as everyone waited to see how Joy would respond to being so thoroughly outplayed on her own show. Kennedy didn't gloat, didn't press his advantage with unnecessary cruelty. He simply sat back, hands folded calmly, the picture of composed confidence. The control room must have been in chaos, but in the studio only one thing mattered. The balance of power had fundamentally shifted. Joy Behar, known for her quick comebacks and sharp wit, had just been outplayed on live television by someone she'd clearly underestimated, and the audience absolutely knew it. Joy straightened in her chair, trying desperately to reclaim the upper hand, her voice turning sharper as she abandoned any pretense of politeness. "So now you're the savior of truth," she said with undisguised sarcasm, shaking her head with a mocking smile. "Please, you twist words better than most twist lies." The audience let out a collective ooh, sensing another attempted blow, waiting to see how Kennedy would handle this more direct accusation. Kennedy didn't flinch, didn't shift, didn't show any sign that the attack had landed. He met her gaze directly, the corners of his mouth lifting just slightly too calm, too confident, the expression of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. "Funny," he said, his tone smooth but cold enough to cut through the mounting tension. "I thought twisting words was the network's job." The studio erupted in gasps and laughter, the kind of sharp intake of breath that comes from witnessing something genuinely shocking. Even Whoopi glanced up from her cords. eyebrows raised like she couldn't quite decide whether to step in or let this chaos continue playing out. Joy blinked rapidly, caught completely off guard by the boldness of calling out the network itself on their own show. She forced a chuckle that didn't quite reach her eyes. Clearly scrambling to recover, she leaned closer, lowering her voice, but sharpening it to a blade. "This isn't your Senate hearing, Senator," she snapped, trying to regain control through authority. "You can't filibuster, you're way out of facts." Kennedy leaned in too, not aggressively, not matching her hostility, just steady and unmovable like bedrock. "No need to," he said, his voice even and almost quiet, but carrying enough weight to silence the entire room. "Facts have a habit of standing while opinions like yours fall over in applause." The audience reacted instantly and powerfully. Some clapped, others gasped, and a few just sat frozen, not entirely sure if they were watching a political debate or witnessing a public execution delivered with such calm precision it was almost surgical. Joy's smirk vanished completely. She opened her mouth to fire back, clearly had something prepared, but the words stalled somewhere between anger and genuine disbelief that this was happening to her on her show in front of her audience. Kennedy didn't press further, didn't pile on or gloat over his advantage. He just leaned back slowly, hands folded calmly in his lap, eyes steady, letting the silence finish what his words had already accomplished. The crowd felt it viscerally. This wasn't just a guest answering hostile questions anymore. This was someone systematically dismantling his interrogator, one calm sentence at a time, with such devastating precision that even Joy seemed to recognize she'd fundamentally miscalculated. Joy's smile had vanished entirely by now. What had started as what she'd intended to be playful banter with an edge had turned into a genuine battle, and she was clearly visibly losing. Her voice sharpened further, frustration seeping through every syllable as she abandoned strategy for pure aggression. "You talk slow because you think it sounds wise," she snapped, her hands gesturing with visible irritation. "It doesn't. It sounds old." The crowd murmured uncomfortably. Some laughed nervously. Others exchanged glances. But the overall sense was that Joy had just crossed a line from political disagreement into personal mockery, from challenging positions into attacking someone's manner of speaking as evidence of diminished capacity. Kennedy didn't move for a long moment. He just looked at her with that same steady calm, like someone waiting patiently for an echo to die before speaking, giving her words time to hang in the air so everyone could fully appreciate what she just said. Then he leaned closer to the microphone, his tone dropping low but remaining firm. His southern drawl carrying the weight of every quiet room he'd ever commanded, every courtroom he'd dominated, every debate he'd won through substance rather than volume. "Down where I come from, ma'am," he said slowly, every single word landing like a hammer wrapped in velvet. "We talk slow so lies don't slip out. You might try it sometime." The audience absolutely exploded. Applause, whistles, even a few cheers rolled through the studio like thunder. The sound of an audience that had just witnessed someone deliver the perfect counterpunch with such devastating calm that it couldn't be dismissed as anger or aggression, only as pure concentrated truth. Joy's face flushed visibly red as she forced a tight smile, but the tension around her eyes betrayed her genuine distress. The camera caught it perfectly. The kind of moment that no amount of media training or professional composure could fully hide. Sarah tried desperately to cut in, her voice tentative and uncertain. "All right, let's keep things civil, folks." But Kennedy wasn't quite finished. His tone stayed perfectly calm, even kind in a way, but the words hit harder than any shout could have achieved. "I didn't come here to sound smart," he said, looking from Joy directly to the camera, speaking to the viewers at home rather than just the hostile host in front of him. "I came here to sound real, but I guess that's offensive in a world addicted to pretending." The applause returned louder this time, longer with the sound of shifting loyalties, an audience that had come expecting to see Joy dismantle another politician. Instead, watching that politician systematically take apart their host's entire approach. Joy's carefully practiced composure cracked visibly. The studio light seemed harsher now, the air thicker with tension. Kennedy didn't gloat, didn't perform victory, didn't do anything except sit back calmly and let his words do all the work. Joy Behar, the queen of control and quick comebacks, suddenly looked like she was the one under interrogation rather than conducting an interview. Joy could feel the floor slipping out from under her completely now. Every comeback had backfired spectacularly. Every smirk had turned into a grimace. Every attempt to diminish Kennedy had somehow made her look smaller. She straightened her back, summoning whatever remained of her combative energy, desperate but still defiant. "You think being blunt makes you brave?" she said, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. That sounded hollow in the charged atmosphere. "It just makes you reckless." The audience stirred, sensing she was swinging what might be her last punch, trying one final time to land something that would shift the momentum back in her direction. Kennedy didn't rush to reply. He rose slightly from his chair, adjusting his posture to sit taller, his eyes fixing not on Joy, but on the main camera, as if he was addressing the millions watching at home, rather than the person attacking him in the studio. "Reckless," he said evenly, letting the words sit for a moment, "is pretending you're brave behind a cue card. I speak without one." The crowd erupted again. Whistles, sustained clapping, a few shouts of, "That's it," echoing through the studio in genuine appreciation of the devastating simplicity of the response. Even Whoopi raised her eyebrows, her hand half covering what looked like an appreciative grin. Despite the chaos, Joy blinked, visibly stunned for a long moment, then forced herself to recover one more time. "You're just performing honesty," she shot back, her voice tighter now, almost pleading for the control she'd completely lost. The laughter in the room died down, just enough for Kennedy's reply to land with crystal clarity. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Didn't even shift his expression much. "No, ma'am," he said softly, but with absolute certainty, steady as a heartbeat. "I'm just not afraid to sound wrong in a world obsessed with sounding right." The silence that followed was deafening, the kind that makes an entire room forget to breathe. The weight of a statement so simple and so profound that it temporarily stops all other thought. Joy's lips parted, clearly searching for a response. But no words came. Nothing she could say would diminish what he just articulated, that authenticity matters more than performing correctness, that being genuine beats sounding smart. That courage sometimes means accepting you might be wrong rather than pretending you're always right. Kennedy held her gaze for one beat longer, then looked back toward the audience, his expression unreadable, but his presence absolutely overwhelming the space. It wasn't just a comeback, it was checkmate, and everyone in the room knew it. Joy sat frozen in her chair. The tension in the studio so thick it felt like the air itself had stopped moving. The audience was alive on its own now. No applause lights needed, no prompting required, just genuine reaction to witnessing something unprecedented. Her signature TV smile twitched at the corners. That professional expression that had carried her through thousands of interviews and countless confrontations, but now it looked brittle, almost painful to maintain, like a mask that no longer fit properly. The cue cards in her hands shook slightly, her fingers digging into them until the paper creased visibly. She forced a breath and tried to speak, opened her mouth with clear intention, but nothing emerged. It wasn't that she didn't have words somewhere. It was that none of them would sound strong enough. Now, none of them could possibly recover what she'd lost. Kennedy didn't move right away. He didn't have to. The silence itself was doing his work, making his points without requiring additional words. When he finally leaned forward again, his voice dropped to that calm, measured tone that had turned every one of Joy's insults into self-inflicted wounds. "You called me a joke," he said, his draw slow and deliberate, giving each word time to land properly. "But a joke's only funny until it tells the truth. The line cut through the room like a blade through glass. Simple, devastating, impossible to argue with. Gasps first, then a building wave of sound as the audience rose to their feet, clapping, some even shouting. The kind of genuine chaos that cameras struggle to fully contain. Someone in the back yelled, "Say it again," and laughter broke through like thunder, amplifying the moment. Joy blinked rapidly, still maintaining that smile, but her eyes telling a completely different story. Cornered, shaken, exposed in a way she'd probably never been on television before. Kennedy waited patiently for the noise to settle, didn't try to ride the moment or encourage more applause. He simply turned his head toward Joy once more. Steady and unflinching, his expression almost gentle, despite the devastation he was delivering. "In this room, Miss Behar," he said quietly but clearly, "I didn't outtalk you. You just ran out of things to believe." The studio went completely still. The sound technician forgot to breathe. The control room, usually a storm of voices and instructions, fell into absolute silence as every producer stared at the monitors, realizing they were watching television history unfold in real time. The camera zoomed in tight on Joy's face, capturing her smile, finally disappearing entirely, her jaw tensing, her eyes glistening just slightly under the harsh studio lights. Not quite tears, but something close, the visible strain of someone trying desperately to maintain composure while dying inside. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Kennedy's expression didn't change. He looked composed, grounded, like someone who had come prepared to fight with truth instead of volume, with substance instead of performance. Joy's hands trembled visibly as she set her cards down on the desk, her gaze dropping before she forced it back up with obvious effort. But when she met Kennedy's eyes again, there was no power left to project, no authority remaining to claim. The audience, still on their feet, began to chant softly at first, then building Kennedy. Kennedy, Kennedy. The sound growing into something raw and electric, genuine appreciation rather than performed enthusiasm. The red studio light blinked, signaling the end of the segment, but no one in the control room moved to cut away. This moment was too significant, too unprecedented to interrupt with commercial breaks or standard procedure. Kennedy broke the extended silence with a quiet breath, leaning forward one final time. "The thing about truth, ma'am," he said, just loud enough for the microphone to catch, but quiet enough that it felt intimate, personal, is that it doesn't need applause. It just needs the courage to be said. He leaned back slowly, deliberately, folding his hands on the table with absolute finality. The crowd roared again, not just clapping now, but standing, shouting, some even filming with their phones. The kind of spontaneous celebration that happens when people witness something genuine in a world of performance. Joy stayed seated, her face frozen in that strange mix of disbelief and forced grace, her mind clearly racing for a way out, for some response that could salvage something from this complete dismantling. But the moment had already chosen its winner, and everyone present knew it. The camera caught everything with brutal clarity. Kennedy still perfectly calm under the heat of the studio lights. Joy silent and shaken in her own spotlight. It was more than a debate or a disagreement. It was a televised reckoning, a reminder that quiet confidence beats aggressive performance. That careful thought defeats quick comebacks. That real power doesn't need to announce itself. It simply exists and makes itself known when necessary. When the director finally whispered, "Cut," the instruction barely registered because the story had already written itself. Already become the kind of moment that would be replayed and analyzed and remembered long after the cameras stopped rolling. Senator John Kennedy had walked into a trap prepared for him, and instead of being caught, he'd calmly dismantled every piece of it while never raising his voice above a measured draw, never losing his composure, never stooping to the level of hostility directed at him. And in doing so, he'd reminded everyone watching that sometimes the slowest speaker in the room is actually giving everyone else time to catch